You mention in the film about your own reticence with people, your shyness, and there's been a part of you that it feels like, I think to a lot of the public, has been closed off at times.
Yeah.
And this documentary is the first time that you've really decided to be upfront with everything, personal life, professional, a lot of aspects. Why now? What kind of moved you at this moment in your life to kind of share some of these things that you had been holding back a little bit?
Well, you know, my dad passed away in 2005, and in the 8 years between when my mom passed away and when my dad passed away, I got to know my dad in ways that I'd never known him my whole life. And it really had to do with, I'm a lot like my dad. I don't talk very much, and it really kept me from understanding him until he needed me to take care of him. And I learned things about him that I hadn't known. And I didn't want to go through that with my own children and any people that I had known that might have been put off by my shyness, you know. So I figured I'd come forth and speak on those subjects now while I still remember. You know, it's hard to get all the facts of your life down and mash them into 90 minutes, but we managed to do it. I think they did a great job.
I can imagine that was actually very challenging. I mean, partially the recollection and then deciding, you know, what to say and what to still maybe withhold. In going through that, did you find that it served the purpose that you kind of hoped it would in terms of whether it was the influence from your father, you know, before he passed, and this openness that you kind of inspired you to have? Did the movie, the documentary, feel that way, that you were kind of relaxing about these things now?
Well, it felt like I was willing to open up and answer questions on whatever subject. We had to go through a lot of decision making with regard to what we would cover in depth and what was not that important. So, you know, that was the back and forth on the decision making as to what we really got into in the film. There are
a lot of, I mean, sensitive moments in this film, sensitive issues to do with your family in particular, the separation or the difficulty of being away from your kids a lot during your playing career, the estrangement for a time from your parents. Then you kind of go head on with those. Were those, how difficult was it to finally kind of discuss some of those things in a public way?
I was surprised that it wasn't that difficult. It's just, once you make a decision, you follow through with it and you let the chips fall. But I didn't think that telling the truth about my life was going to negatively impact my life that much at this point. So I went on ahead and did it.
And you know, you saw interviews within the documentary of your sons who are speaking obviously very candidly themselves. Was that a nice aspect of this, to kind of involve them in a way that, you know, obviously they're not involved in your playing life, but in this particular you know, endeavor, they're you know, they're obviously part of the story. How was it to have them involved? It
was great having my sons involved, and my sons got to know all the guys on the Showtime team pretty well because I often would bring them to practice. So they knew all of these people that were talking in the film, and they had memories of their interactions with them, and just what having to deal with me being a professional athlete was all about.
Yeah. A lot of the film, and again, just kind of reiterated by the title, is just, you know, there's a very solo aspect to your life, especially early on and through your career, and you talk a lot about. There's a quote from you actually where you say, "I'm just a person like any other person." You fit the basketball side fine, but the fame part of it, the celebrity, was always uneasy for you, it seems. Is that, you feel, still the case to this day? Does that ever change over time?
I've been dealing with celebrity and just sticking out for so long. I don't know anything else. I haven't had any other experience where I had anonymity or I fit in. I certainly don't disappear in a crowd. You can see that from the opening shots where I'm like walking in Times Square and I stick out. You know, that's just been part of my life that I had to accommodate.
Do you think you're more comfortable with your celebrity, your fame, you're sticking out now than you were 30 years ago?
Well, yeah, I've learned how to cope with it, and I've dealt with some of the issues. A lot of the times, you don't draw positive attention, especially if you run into a lot of Knicks fans or Celtics fans, But I didn't mind doing it. It ended up being the right thing to do.
Yeah. Has that part of you changed a little bit? Just because it's, at a certain point, this just is reality. Do you find yourself at all more at ease now, whether it's crowds or people, seeking you out to, say, hey, I was a big fan and these kinds of things?
I think I'm dealing with it better. I don't know if I like it anymore, but I'm dealing with it in a more, in an easier way. It's something that I've accepted, and when you accept that this is what you have to deal with, you find ways to accommodate it that don't put a whole lot of stress on your life.
Your social activism and your social conscience, which is something that is obviously very prominent to this day. You're, accomplished author, essayist, scholar. You are still very plugged into, the issues of our time. We see some of that early on in the documentary too. What were some of the first triggers for that, for you to kind of get involved, to decide, I'm not just an athlete, I'm a member of the society, and there are things I need to speak about?
I'd say the very first one was the murder of Emmett Till. I was 8 years old when he got murdered, and I didn't understand what had happened. I was old enough to kind of grasp that he had done something wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And my parents couldn't explain it to me. They didn't have the words for it. They really hadn't thought about all the issues and figured it out in terms of being able to explain it to a child. So I was very keenly interested in what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, and I followed it closely. There's a picture of me in there at a news conference with Dr. King. I got to ask him a question, and talk with him. It really affected me, just to interact with him. Within 5 years of that, 4 years of that incident, he had been assassinated. So a lot of this really was personal, just having to do with my own personal experiences and what I'd seen happening in America. I was recruited by a number of schools in the South at a time when all the schools down there were segregated, and that had its effect on me and my outlook. So a lot of these things crossed over in my life.
What was the first thing that you can remember actually taking more of a public stand on or participating in that kind of maybe set you apart a little, where you then had to deal with a little bit of the backlash?
Geez, I think the Harlem riot in summer of '64, I covered it as a correspondent for our weekly newspaper that I was involved with. It was a summer job set up. It was, I forget the exact, excuse me,
Sure.
I'm at a loss for words here. It was a summer program set up to show the kids in Harlem, to give them an opportunity to learn about their community and what they could do to make it a better place. And it was a very important thing in my life. Dr. Clark is the one who set the program up, and it really enabled me to understand what my community was all about, what Harlem was all about, and how important it was for Black Americans. And it really had a profound effect on me, and I'd say that changed my life because it helped me to understand what was going on in this country and what had to be done about it, or at least start thinking about what could be done about it.
Yeah. I'm curious your view now of how today's athletes are dealing with the issues of the day, because the modern athlete has often been criticized for being a little more disengaged, or for caring only about the paycheck or the endorsements, or not wanting to alienate corporate America or mainstream America. But in the last couple of years, especially in the NBA, it feels like there's been more of a movement to engage. LeBron James has been very out front recently talking about gun control. He and his teammates in Miami had made a statement during the Trayvon Martin case, and time after time, the T-shirts with "I Can't Breathe" last season. So there's been more of that. I'm curious, do you find that encouraging? That these are maybe baby steps. They're not marching in the streets, but do you see that there is a higher consciousness now and more of a willingness to engage?
I definitely appreciate the consciousness aspect of it, because these are young men that are concerned about what's happening in our country. And really, I don't see any difference between what they're doing and their connection with the civil rights movement, because it's still an extension of that same civil rights movement. The issue that summer of '64 was an unarmed black kid getting shot in the streets of Harlem, and over the past couple of years, we've seen a number of deaths of unarmed black youth that were killed by police and law enforcement that really leave a lot of questions. So we're still dealing with the same issues. And I think that it's really all part of the same piece. It's all has to do with civil rights and human rights. And these people are concerned. I remember there were a couple of players on the Cleveland Browns who were very upset about the killing of Tamir Rice. And they were worried about it because they were parents, and they could see where Tamir Rice could have been their kid. And that's something that really makes you stop and think, hey, my kid could get shot down in the street just because of the color of his skin, and the kid was playing with a toy pistol, and he shot dead on Christmas Day. It's a really horrible event, and we have to do something about affecting that.
You think there's, to that end, is there even more that today's athletes, with the stage that they have, should be doing, or do you try not to maybe lecture the next generation about where they could go with that? Because it seems like there's a line that they won't cross. That there may be a statement, there may be a short a gesture, but it seems like there's another place they won't go.
I don't know that. I think that would probably be something that you'd have to find out by talking to each athlete individually and finding out what their opinion was and how concerned they were about that.
Yeah. If you don't mind, actually, I'm just thinking about this. I mean, the Thabo Sefolosha case, obviously happening, which happened right here in New York, a current NBA player, and certainly that had a lot of players concerned about, their teammate, their colleague. Did that one in particular resonate too? Because again, this is, police brutality is one of the things that animated you early on, and also I'm curious about, your own father and grandfather were police officers. I imagine there's a certain complexity in your own thinking there, just because of you've seen many aspects of these relations.
Yeah, I have, and police officers have incredibly difficult jobs, and we need them. They are the blue line between order and chaos. So we have to respect them and try to make their jobs doable. But at the same time, they have to respect the people that they are put out there to protect and serve. I mean, it's a two-way street, and I don't think they're always conscious of that. The police officers sometimes get a little bit arrogant with their power and look down on the people that they're supposed to be protecting and serving.
Did you take an interest in the Sefolosha case because of your own history in these issues? Yeah,
I did take an interest in it, but you got to let the process work itself out. So there's a jury listening to this case, and they'll know a lot more about it than I would, because I wasn't there, and I don't know who's exactly telling the truth and what's going on with that. I'm sure that it will work itself out, hopefully to everybody's satisfaction.
these are the kind of issues, I mean, you write about these things all the time. Now you've got the regular standing essays in Time magazine, and these are issues that you address all the time. You are more these days, obviously, author, scholar, filmmaker than almost anything else, and it's been 26 years since your retirement, but most introductions are still, and here's Hall of Famer, all-time scoring leader, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I get the sense sometimes that you would prefer those things to be reversed now. That it's been a while since you were that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Do you find that part of it still? I don't want to say difficult. It's obviously part of your legacy. But do you feel like that people love you? You kind of put an athlete in a box, and then it's, well, this is who you are. You're over here.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. I'm very happy that people know who I am. That gives me the opportunity to, when I write, people who know who I am might be more interested in what I'm writing. So I don't reject it, but I think it has to be dealt with in perspective. As you mentioned, I've been retired for 26 years. A whole lot has happened since then, and I'm doing different things now. So people are going to have to get used to that.
You've also been to that end. I mean, you're very active in social media. You've got a Twitter account with, I don't know how many followers. You've blown my follower count out of the water a long time ago. That's all I know. But there's an interaction that can go on there. How much do you find yourself either responding to, or at least do you check the replies? Are you curious? Because you write a lot of things that are obviously on some polarizing issues. Yes. There's going to be a response there.
Yeah, and I've gotten my share of hate mail, absolutely. Some of the stances I've taken have annoyed various people just because they have a certain point of view that conflicts with mine. So, but I've got to accept that, and I have to deal with that.
The irony there, I think people would see this, like there was, and you talk about this at length in the documentary, that your relations with the media wasn't always great, and a little frosty. You even say at some point that you felt like that really did hurt you. This is a new era where athletes, celebrities of all stripes can put their message out there anytime on social media, Twitter or otherwise. Do you find that to be kind of a freeing thing, that you can, whatever the narrative may be, whether it's about yourself or about issues that you are passionate about, you've got a more of a direct line now than you would have ever had when you were much more in the spotlight as a player?
Yeah, I think the ability to directly interact with the public at large allows my thoughts to be conveyed without having to go through the filter of someone who is interviewing me and might have their own biases. So I think that's good. When I started playing, I had to deal with a very conservative core of press people who thought that athletes are out there to play the game and keep their mouths shut, except if they're answering questions that the press wanted to ask them. And we had a place, and we were supposed to stay in our place. And I never agreed with that. And I had my own opinions, and I was willing to defend them. And I guess that made me somewhat of a maverick, and that's one of the reasons that the relationship kind of was as difficult as it was.
Do you wonder how different it might have been if you'd actually had the avenue, the tool of social media in your own time?
Oh yeah, it probably would have been quite different, because I could have given my opinion and not have to have other people put their 2 cents into it and try to spin it.
Yeah. There's not anything in particular in the documentary where it gets into that, where you felt either burned or mischaracterized. So I am curious, were there a couple of those moments, or one that sticks out in particular, where you really felt like either the fact that you'd been standoffish with the press, or just whatever their agenda might have been at the time, where you felt that really had hurt you?
Well, there was an interview I did with Joe Garagiola where he suggested that if I didn't like what was happening in the country, that I should leave the country because he didn't like the tone of what I had to say and the fact that I was not going to go to the Olympics. And that he was pretty direct about it. And at least in that interview, I got to give my opinion. But that's what I was up against. You know, the people that were interviewing me and trying to convey my thoughts really had their own biases, and they were going to give precedence to their opinions as opposed to mine.
Yeah. How did you deal with it then? Was it just to simply withdraw, or were there other ways? And how frustrating must that have been for someone who is obviously as outspoken and as you are to have to not engage or have that ability to kind of come back?
It was difficult. It was a hard thing to do, but I think that a lot of people saw through the attempts at manipulation and figured out what I was all about. So I think more often than not, I got my point across.
Lighter note, the documentary does spend a couple of minutes talking about your friendship with Bruce Lee and the film you did with him. It goes into Airplane, one of my all-time favorites. And then Arsenio Hall actually says, like, wow, there's, Kareem, laughing and joking, and what a great revelation that was, that, even your friends saw for you, feeling like they wished it seemed like that the public got to see that more often. What was those moments like for you? Do you feel like maybe you could have done or should have done more just so the public could see kind of that the humorous side?
Well, I think as the 80s went on and the Lakers started winning games and the press wasn't asking me how come the Lakers did not win the world championship with you on the team. Well, we were winning world championships, and I think playing with Magic made that a lot easier because he was a darling of the media, and it just lightened the whole mood up and allowed me to put some of the ill will behind me.
Bruce Lee in particular, and our younger viewers probably don't know who Bruce Lee is. They'll have to go Google it, look up Wikipedia. But
most young people know who Bruce Lee is.
Do they? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the T-shirts are still around everywhere, right? Like he's become one of those iconic figures that even if you didn't know him or see his movies.
They all watch the movies.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at it, because I talk to people all the time and they want to say, what was Bruce Lee actually like?
Yeah.
There's still curiosity about him.
I think that particular chapter of your life, and people are probably less aware of. Give us a little sense of what Bruce Lee was like and how that relationship, that friendship evolved.
Well, I started studying martial arts basically with my dad teaching me how to box. But as I went through college, I started to become curious about Oriental martial arts. And one of the people at Black Belt Magazine, I got a chance to know him, and he introduced me to Bruce. He said, geez, if you want to study martial arts, you should go and meet this guy, Bruce Lee. He's very interesting. He's doing his own thing. So I was curious enough to go and have a meeting with him, and I was immediately won over to Bruce. His personality was more or less irresistible. And we became friends, and I trained with him for 4 years. But the friendship was really the most important part of it for me. It was a great thing, and I miss him. Good guy.
What was he like? I mean, he strikes me as somebody who had a certain kind of mischievous sense of humor about him. But.
He had a mischievous sense of humor. He was a practical joker, and he was someone that really. You would want to know. He's that kind of person. He's always kept the mood light, and always was. He never felt that he was here and you were there. He dealt with everybody, giving them the opportunity to be themselves, and as long as they accepted him for who he was.
Did you ever have a temptation after doing, a martial arts movie with Bruce Lee and doing the cameo in Airplane? Was there a temptation to move further in that direction, explore it a little, or was that just kind of all right, I've had my fill, I've done that?
Well, Bruce died, when I was like 24 years old, 24, 25 years old when Bruce died. And, he wasn't there. That's why, I tell people how I miss him. The relationship didn't get a chance to have the 15 or 20 years of interaction. You know.
In terms of just like the grand scope of this movie, because we see there's a lot of basketball interspersed with a lot of just those personal moments, personal feelings, relationships. What are the things that you're hoping the most that people can kind of take away from this? That if it feels like that they didn't have a chance to kind of get to know you before, what are you hoping they most come away with this film?
Well, I just hope that they can realize that the reason that I was so hard to understand had to do with my shyness and my reticence to talk to people that I thought might be looking to make me look bad. You know, that was how my relationship with the press developed. And part of that had to do with the fact that when I was at UCLA, Coach Wooden told us not to talk to the press. He felt that they could be a distraction, and you know, there was more negative that could come about from that interaction than positive. And that type of suspicion and you know, standoffishness really did not serve me well as a professional athlete. Professional athletes have to work with the press. Our jobs go hand in hand, and you have to accept that and deal with it. So you know, I think that really, that set of circumstances was something that it took me a while to figure out and navigate in a way that I could accept.
Yeah. You would do it differently now, you think?
Oh, absolutely, I do it differently. I started doing it differently while I was still playing.
Yeah. But not soon enough to maybe turn the tide of the opinion. Like the caricatures had already been drawn that
right.
this is Kareem. He's going to be a little standoffish. And
yeah, I was already cast as the moody black guy, and you know, it was hard to escape that caricature.
When you say at one point in the movie that you thought that did hurt you, did you think that hurt you even within NBA corridors? That for the longest time, I know you wanted to get into coaching, and it seemed like it was difficult to break through until you know, I think the Clippers and then the Lakers following that.
Right, but it always the NBA part of it always had to do with the fact that a lot of the teams felt that I was too much my own man, and I would be a difficult person to have as a head coach. So I didn't get that opportunity.
You did, you know, the last turn you took on that stage was working with the Lakers and working with Bynum. Mm-hmm. It's been a while now. Have you had any impulse to go back, or are you kind of content with the path you're taking now? I've
had a couple guys come to me and ask me to work with them. Joakim Noah came, and geez, that's like two or three years ago. But I worked with him and helped him. The next year he was Defensive Player of the Year. I felt I had something to do with that. And then Roy Hibbert also asked me to come and work with him. He's with the Lakers now. I might have a chance to put a few words in his ear at this point. But I think that I could have had a good career as a coach, but I never got the opportunity, so we'll never know.
There's a couple moments in the movie where you know, Riley and some former teammates and even opponents are marveling about the skyhook. When these guys come to you, does anybody ever ask to be taught the skyhook? And obviously no one has really tried in a major way to incorporate it in their game.
Yeah, I know. I don't get why people don't try to learn the hook shot. You don't have to shoot it like I shot it, but the mechanics of it make it a very difficult shot to block. And if you can get your body in close to the basket, you're taking a 6 to 8 foot shot. That's a high percentage shot. A lot of players could benefit from that, but it doesn't seem like it's in style. And I think a lot more of that has to do with the popularity of the three-point shot. Yeah. You know, everybody wants to. It's like lotto fever. You know, everybody has 3 as opposed to 2, and you know, they don't get the idea of a high percentage shot being more beneficial to a team than a three-point shot. Yeah. I remember the playoffs we played against the Celtics in '85. The most number of three-point shots that were taken in the whole series, I think, was like 7 or 8. I think the Memorial Day Massacre, Boston made 7 three-point shots. Nowadays, they'll take 20 shots and a half. Will be 3-point shots. So by putting a premium on a low percentage shot, it's changed the nature of the game.
Yeah. Do you think that's for the worse, for the better, just different? I mean, do you enjoy watching it?
It's different. I don't enjoy watching it as much, but I think the fans like it, so it's going to remain part of the game.
It's funny because just in terms of pace, the Warriors' style has been analogized to Showtime. Just if nothing else, it's the up and back. The 3-point part of it is obviously much different. But do you see that at all, or is that kind of a bad analogy from the Showtime standpoint?
I think it's a bad analogy because we played the game differently at both ends of the court, and we had an inside-outside thing going at Showtime. The Warriors don't have too much going inside, but they have absolutely shot the lights out. I saw a thing on Stephen Curry where he was practicing 3-point shots. He made 77 in a row, 92 out of 100. That's incredible. I never saw anybody shoot like that. That type of consistency from that range is pretty remarkable, and when you got people that can shoot like that, you should let them go.
I mean, as they say, it's a copycat league, so this pace and space and 3-point shooting, that's become the trend, but things kind of move around. Do you see a time when the big man becomes more featured again, becomes more important again? Can it swing back, or does it maybe take a transcendent kind of player like a Kareem or a Shaq, type to come along to maybe force it in that direction?
I think a player that can deliver in the paint would change people's minds again, because the closer you get to the basket, the higher your shooting percentage goes, and coaches are aware of that. So I think that if you get somebody that can deliver in there consistently, that it might change. But trends are what they are, and we'll just have to wait and see.
There's that moment in the documentary that everybody remembers of the rocking chair. This uncomfortable, slightly but humorous, lighthearted moment on your farewell tour, the rocking chair. When you got to that 20th year, did you know immediately? Did you know beforehand? When did you decide, this is when to close this chapter? How did you know?
I knew that I needed to retire when it was getting difficult for me to live up to the standards that I had set for myself personally. I could see that either I wasn't interested or I was losing that mythical half step. So I really didn't have any problem leaving the game when I did. I probably could have played a little bit longer if they had gone to chartering planes, because I would have gotten more rest and been able to deal with the travel schedule. But that's hindsight.
That moment, it seems like it's tough for a lot of athletes to come to grips with, especially the greats. And I'm thinking about Kobe Bryant right now, entering his 20th season with the Lakers and kind of declining to say whether this might be it for him. And he seems like, knowing Kobe, that he might just keep pushing the envelope, and he's gone through now 3 consecutive major injuries. Can you, on just a psychological level, emotional level, knowing the attachment to the game and the highs that you can have, especially as one of the all-time greats, can you feel a little bit about what he's going through, wrestling with that? Yeah,
I understand what he's going through, and it's very difficult to accept your own decline. There are a lot of things that give you indications that you're not really declining. So it's a very difficult thing, and it's up to the individual really to figure it out and not hold on for too long.
Yeah. Do you find yourself, wincing a little bit, maybe even that, because you see, these have been serious injuries, the Achilles, the knee, the shoulder. It almost feels like he's defying his own body, basically saying, I get to decide when to go.
Right. And when you're 25 years old, that's really easy, and your body still has the ability to heal itself. But as you get closer to that 40, that number 40, it gets more and more difficult. So I think that, you know, it's up to Kobe though. You know, he doesn't have anything to prove, and if he walks away from the game right now, nobody can say a thing. He's proven that he's one of the all-time greats of the game.
Yeah, no doubt. Last thing here on the documentary. At the end, there's just kind of this poignant moment, and you know, the voiceover is, you know, after all he's been through, he's free. Are you feeling that, especially with kind of completing this particular project and what this project represents? Is this, you know, you feeling free now?
Well, yeah, I feel free now just because I adjusted to living a life probably I could have started writing 20, 25 years ago. Well, actually, I did start writing 20, 25 years ago. But I could have been more enthusiastic about it. And I was just trying it as something to do, even though I understood that I had the training and I had the mindset to apply myself that way. But it took a while before I got to the point where I could be comfortable with it, and I'm comfortable with it now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The documentary is Kareem, Minority of One. Catch it on HBO, and thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.